Acting Chief Justice Zondo is the last candidate to be interviewed for the CJ position of the Con Court. Now let's cross back to our anchor, Stephen Grooters, who's in Sandton. Stephen, definitely a time where the most questioning has been happening, as you've mentioned with Diane, around the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. Quite interesting how they've dealt into that for majority of the questioning.
Absolutely. I mean, in a way, I think no surprises. This is what we thought would happen. And it's also because this is the most recent work that he's done. Well, is that a fair assessment? Let me put that to Mbekezeli Benjamin from Judges Matter. So there are several things running here, and as always with the Judicial Service Commission, good afternoon, by the way, Mbekezeli, my apologies, my manners. There's the politics of the day that runs through the Judicial Service Commission. If anyone doubts that, feel free to watch all the tapes of what happened yesterday. Then you've got the work of the judge, their entire sort of life story, judicially speaking. And then you've got the sort of the most recent period. And that's what we're really seeing now, isn't it? The most recent period of the Acting Chief Justice's work under a very intense microscope.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most recent work is usually the one at the front of mind of most commissioners, because that's often what they can recall. And with Justice Zondo, his work has been on the State Capture Commission, so it would have been sort of odd if they didn't ask about that. As you'll remember, earlier in the week, Justice Madlang was asked about a judgment he gave only a month ago. So it's interesting, but I think so far the interviews have spent so much time on the State Capture Commission, and it has very little to do with his role on being the Chief Justice. And it's odd. It's odd to see.
It's also, I mean, I've seen no one really ask him questions, maybe I missed them, about his role as Deputy Chief Justice. You know, what did you do to support the then Chief Justice Mokweng, for example?
Yeah, I think Minister Lamula tried to ask such a question, to say, what was your role in the court modernization project, which is a very big project, which yesterday we heard Judge Mlambo speak to that project in some detail. And all that Justice Zondo could say today about it was that, look, he embraces it. He's not a tech whiz. And that was a little bit disappointing, because you would expect the second in command to be a little bit more au fait of what's currently going on in the judiciary.
I mean, this is a very difficult question. Is it fair to ask him about all the decisions he made about the Zondo Commission? I mean, in a way to relitigate the Zondo Commission, but I also don't see how you could avoid that. I mean, that's what we all know him for.
Well, I think the only way we can assess fairness is what relevance does it have to his position as Chief Justice. I can accept the question about whether the decisions he took in the Zondo Commission will ultimately be litigated in the High Court, and it doesn't look well for the Chief Justice. But the question of why he should have called this witness or that witness, that is completely relevant to the job of Chief Justice. Arthur Fraser could have gone to court to challenge those decisions. It shouldn't be relitigated in the JSC.
The timing is also unfortunate, isn't it? Because, you know, you would have thought that, and when all of this sort of started, you know, 6 months ago, the Chief Justice process, nomination process, I mean, you'd have thought the Zondo Commission would have been done by December. But it wasn't. And in fact, only just this week, the second part was handed over. So in a way, the timing couldn't have been worse.
It's terrible. It's terrible, Stephen. But I think Justice Zondo could have anticipated some of these things, because they were not operating in completely different universes. They were happening at the same time. So I also think, on his part, could have been, I think, more careful in the way that he went about things.
We're now speaking to the final candidate, and we haven't finished that interview, so it may be a little too early to ask this question, but I think we are now in a position where we can assess how the Commission has treated the 4 different candidates. We've had quite a big taste of how it's treating Judge Zondo. We've seen, of course, Justice Madlanga, we've seen Justice Maya, we've seen Justice Mlambo. For you, are there big changes big differences in the way that these 4 candidates have been treated? At the same time, I mean, you know, only one did the Zondo Commission. Only one has done some of the politically contentious decisions in the Gauteng High Court.
Look, I think with Justice Zondo, there are about 16 more commissioners who still need to ask him questions, so it's difficult to assess how his interview will go. It's only at the beginning. but certainly there has been an unequal treatment of the candidates throughout the week. In the first 2 days, we saw a more mellow, dignified, respectful JSC that was really focused on getting the qualities that the candidates have that will prepare them for Chief Justice. But yesterday, there was a little bit of that, but quite a bit on issues that were sort of in the political space, on the startling allegations that were brought up by Commissioner Mpofu. All of those seem to suggest that the urgency of the JSC having a criteria is much more now than it was perhaps a week ago or any time in the past. The JSC needs to find a mechanism to make sure that they remain focused.
I mean, there's a lot to talk about there, and I think there's going to be a lot of commentary over the next few days about that. The issue of criteria may also it may not end as well as people think. If, for example, the Judicial Service Commission were to adopt quite detailed criteria, you would sort of prejudge hearings. But also, I'm reminded of the fact that, and this is true, that the best qualified finance minister we ever had was Des Van Rooyen. You know, I mean, not for long, but it was Des Van Rooyen. So what I'm saying is that the criterion argument, I understand it, but there are going to be people who come along who are just perfect candidates because they break the criteria. There are going to be people who come along who are unarguably not good candidates, even though they win on the criteria. I mean, how strongly are you wedded to that?
Well, I think the criteria will operate at two levels. On the first level, yes, it does set out the kind of qualities that are needed for one to be a judicial officer or even the Chief Justice. But on the second level, it also guides the type of questions, because it's not supposed to work as a strict sort of rubric that the commissioners can't move away from. It's supposed to be the guidelines on the types of questions and the types of issues that might be taken up. And it also helps the chairperson in deciding how to overrule questions, for example. If in a situation where, as a commissioner, you're concerned about whispers, as Commissioner Mpofu was, then he could say, look, Chairperson, these whispers I'm hearing relate to this kind of quality that is in our criteria. Can I put these questions? And the chairperson could say, look, these are important issues. You should be permitted to ask the questions, or these are not relevant issues to the criteria that we're looking for, so I'm overruling that question. It also introduces that fairness to the candidates.
Well, the issue of the chairing of these commissions, I think, is going to be a big thing. Mbekezeli Benjamin, it's been great talking to you over the last few days. I really appreciate your contribution. Mbekezeli Benjamin is from Judges Matter.